Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are continuing in our parenting roadmap classes on Sunday night, but we're going to take a brief break from the conversations that we're having with parents. We're going to continue those next week. But this week, I'm blessed to be joined by Marcus Stinson, our high school minister, and Kyle Beard, our middle school minister. And we're going to try to provide some helpful information about kind of what it looks like, the environment that our high school students are going to school in, and what, some information that might be helpful for just understanding their environment a little bit more. And so starting next week, we'll continue with our conversation with parents. We'll be in the mile marker preparing for high school, so we thought it was a good time to have this conversation. I'd like to begin by reading a passage from Luke chapter 8 before we dive in, and this is a story that speaks to both the compassion of Jesus and the courage of someone in need of help, and how those two intersect. Luke 8, starting in verse 40, it says, "Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue, came, and he fell at Jesus' feet, and he pleaded with him, and he said, 'Come to the house,' because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. A woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, and no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. 'Who touched me?' Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, 'Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me.' Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace.'" I think there are several themes that are relevant for teenagers. One, that teenagers often like to try to go unnoticed, right? They often try to blend in. They often don't want to be have their faith put on display, but yet Jesus knows and Jesus wants them to courageously reach out to him. And we also serve a God who knows when we have reached out. Even the smallest touch in the middle of this big crowd, Jesus notices. And so, we want our kids to be those who not only reach out to Jesus, but know that Jesus is going to be there for them when they do. And so, we want to have this conversation in the context of, wanting to raise courageous teens who are those who act out in their faith even when it's a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm going to give two definitions, and then we're going to dive in. And the first is a definition to the word culture, and there are a lot of these floating around, guys, that we've all seen, but I think this one is kind of helpful because it gives an analogy that puts culture in the terms of a computer. And it says, culture, to use a computer analogy, is humanity's operating system. Like a computer operating system, culture gets installed with certain default settings that, unless overridden, determine how humans view their world and their structure every day, and structure their everyday behavior. That's from Tim Clydesdale. And this idea that if we're not careful, we're just going to begin to act like the people around us. We're just going to begin to behave like the things that we're seeing in our everyday lives. And without some intentionality, these two can become our default settings. And the second term that is helpful is the term worldview. And we all have a way in which we view the culture, a way in which we view ourselves, and a way in which we make decisions. And often that flows from our worldview. And so this is from Kyle Strobel, and he says, "We all have a vision of life, a worldview that helps us to explain reality and make value judgments. This vision becomes a story that we tell ourselves and others, either explicitly or implicitly." So some examples: the businessman who works 70 hours a week says things like "time is money" and "knowledge is power," is telling a story about the way the world is. His life is a demonstration of his vision of reality. The vision of life serves as a kind of filter, letting in some bits of information and screening out others. And this filter works on the level of instinct and intuition below consciousness. We are seldom aware of it at all, just as people who wear eyeglasses eventually forget that they're wearing them, right? So we know that our worldview, like our culture, can become something that we don't notice because we get immersed in it. And sometimes we have to take a little bit of time to self-reflect and reflect as a community about why we believe what we believe. And so our conversation is going to be about these 4 contextual factors that influence our worldview as a result of our culture. And so I'm about to stop talking and let these guys talk. But the 4 factors we're going to look at are technology, polarization, sexuality, and anxiety. And you're like, hey, those are 4 huge topics. And so we're just going to be hitting them at a very, very broad level with hopefully some information that will either cause you to dive in deeper for yourselves or enter into a conversation with us further about some of these topics. And so some of the information that we're going to be pulling from is from the Barna Group, and they put out different resources that are for churches that are based from different surveys they've conducted, and so we want to make sure and give them credit. And so every slide that we're using from the Barna Group has that indicated somewhere on there. Some of the information is from other sources, but the ones from Barna are noted as such. So let's talk generations, guys. Marcus, when were you born?
1986.
86?
1986.
86.
Good
okay.
year.
Good year. 86, good year. I was born in 91, so, maybe not as good a year. But the 3 of us fall into the millennial category, 84 to 98. And so, our perspective on this generation and culture is shaped by, of course, when we grew up, right? But some of the other generations, 65 to 83 is known as Gen X. 46 to 64 are the boomers, which has become a word that is often used kind of pejoratively by those that are younger, which is not necessarily right. And then we have the elders, which is 45 or earlier, and that is not talking about our elders here at McDermott Road necessarily. But the generation we're talking about is Gen Z, which is 99 to 2015. And I believe that all the students that are now in the youth ministry are born post-2000, correct?
That's right. Yep.
There are no more 90s kids.
No more 90s
No more 90s kids.
Sad day.
Which is mind-boggling.
So we are all in the 2000s. And so the first thing that we're going to be talking about is navigating technology. And we thought we would just begin by helping parents maybe understand some of these platforms a little bit better. I've put a few logos up there, but there's a lot that we can talk about. But why don't you guys kind of help explain some of these platforms that our students are using, and we'll start with the easiest one that maybe some of our parents and grandparents and everybody is using. But guys, tell us what Facebook is and what Facebook is about as a softball to get going.
I mean, Facebook is probably in almost in every country in the world, but it is a platform where you can share pictures and share video and share your thoughts, and whether it is with people that you know or people that you don't know. There's lots of groups. You can dive into specific things, or it's basically just sharing things from your world, your life, whether it be personal things or beliefs or whatever, and find commonality with people all around the world. So,
And Facebook, we're, like you said, more likely to see a broader age range. And Facebook owns another company called Instagram. Marcus, why don't you tell us about Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram is a media-focused counterpart to Facebook, much more focused on video, even short videos, reels now, that they kind of borrowed from the TikTok craze. We'll talk about that in a second. But photos. And I think one of the things that we really want to make sure that everybody understands as we talk about these different platforms is you should view them as being analogous to different social settings and events. People go to different social networks for different reasons. There are different demographics represented there, so you're going to see different shades of people's personality and character there. Everybody is on Facebook. People are a little bit more reserved on Facebook, or younger folks, our students are going to be more reserved on Facebook than they will be on Instagram, where there aren't as many parents, there aren't as many authority figures, and some of these other platforms that, I mean, us old heads are just breaking into, right? They're a little bit more anonymous, and they can represent a place where they feel a little bit more free. So on Instagram, you're going to see lots of video, lots of images, but it's moving closer to Facebook in terms of demographics. Still probably by far the most popular in terms of the age group that we're talking about today. So,
And you were telling me a little bit about I'm learning too here. You were telling me a little bit about some Instagram kind of alternatives that students are using because of the demographic shift on Instagram. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
The logo that you see that is second from the left is VSCO. It's another picture or image blogging service that you'll see. And what's really interesting about the way that is used sometimes is you'll see in a Instagram bio, the short snippet below all of the profile information, you'll see an actual link that jumps out to this other social network where by and large, people are a little bit more free to post there because it's not as widely used, especially by older demographics. So that's something that you'll see if you browse around on Instagram with our young folks for any period of time, along with other links that will branch out to lots of different places. You'll see Linktree a lot now, where they're either being an ambassador for a certain brand that they really like or trying to earn an ambassadorship for a certain brand that they like. But you'll see a couple of these other networks linked there too.
Kyle, you want to tell us about TikTok?
Oh, TikTok is crazy. I mean, most students are on there, especially our high school students, but there's lots of age ranges on that as far as us millennials and then even older people too. But I mean, there's lots of dances, there's lots of singing, there's lots of things like any of these platforms that you probably don't want to engage in, and other things that you want to engage in a positive way. But I mean, it's another platform for them to share another short form video of I don't know, just trendy things, and whether it be, hey, I really like this certain brand, or it could be just I mean, dancing to music that they find entertaining. And then they share that, and then other people will copy that, and so it won't be their person's voice, it'll be somebody else's voice, but you are imitating them, and you can go down the rabbit hole if you want. But it's just a very popular thing right now, probably getting more momentum as the other platforms, specifically Facebook and Instagram, start to become older in the amount of people that use that. So.
Yeah, so what you're going to see with something like TikTok, it's widely shareable, and you're going to see it on these other platforms. You've seen these videos clipped together again and again and again, coming originally natively from TikTok, but showing up on Instagram, showing up on Facebook, even people's parents putting together dance challenges, Kyle doing dance challenges.
Not good ones.
He goes hard. We appreciate that, Kyle. That's always good. And so, most people know about Twitter. I mean, Twitter's primarily for, 144 character little blast of information, right? But then there's Snapchat, which is one that gives parents a lot of trepidation, and maybe for good reasons. But I want to explain kind of how Snapchat works and some things that parents might want to be aware of with Snapchat.
Yeah, Snapchat, their biggest thing is the fact that you take a picture that, is immediately gone after the person views it. Now, it's not gone. I mean, it's stored somewhere else, but you can't see it anymore. And so that's scary. And then the fact that everything is just deleted or invisible anymore. And so that platform, unfortunately, is used for lots of different negative things. It can be used for positive things and encouragement, but it tends to be sharing things that are not great to see, and you're expressing yourself in a way that you wouldn't express, like to Marcus's point, on other platforms, because the context and audience that is there. So, but it is one-to-one sharing. All the other platforms, I mean, you can see a video and millions of other people can see that video. Snapchat is one-to-one. It's not one to a group. So that makes it very unique in the way that it's being shared to other people.
Yeah, that's an important distinction for sure. And we're seeing more and more of these, alternatives to texting and different things for sharing. We have the logo of WhatsApp on here, but you guys were telling me about a different one as well that has some more gaming connections. So you want to talk about some of these, alternative forms of group communication?
Yeah, so you're seeing the emergence of lots of different apps that offer secure, private messaging, texting, even calling, video calling, file sharing. WhatsApp is definitely probably one of the most prominent in that area. But also something like Discord, which started chiefly in gaming circles for people to do voice chat, but has a really robust text engine as well, and people can create different channels and all sorts of things. I have Discord and use it with several of my different friend groups. But the thing about Discord and some of these other messaging apps is they provide a high level of anonymity. You create a username, you log in, you can, make the avatar whatever you want. It's not necessarily linked to you. You could honestly do that on any social network, but that's not how you connect with people there. So just like something that isn't going to be permanent or is going to have a very short shelf life, anonymity breeds a lot of different things that otherwise wouldn't come out in other contexts. So I think Discord is great. Personally, it's super useful, but just be aware that that exists, and that's something that also could be abused if the worldview is not correct.
So this is just, a super brief introduction, right? There are a lot of these different platforms that we could dive into, but I think, Marcus kind of hit on it at the beginning, to realize that your kids are probably on multiple platforms and they're using them for different purposes and to connect with different people in different ways. And so as a parent, being aware of these different, things that are available to your students is a very important thing. And navigating that is difficult, and we realize that. In any way that we can help with that, we would like to, and please feel free to reach out. But one of the results of this is, a lot of time is spent on the phone, right? And so these are some statistics from Barna out of a survey they conducted. It looks like mid-summer 2020, and so, really pretty relevant data for teens 13 to 17. You can see there we're looking at a little bit over 5 hours a day. Young adults 18 to 21, that bumps up to almost 7 hours a day of screen time. For men, Gen Z, it's a little bit over 5. For ladies, it's 6.35. So pretty consistent range across those demographics. But anything jump out to you guys from seeing these numbers offhand? Seem about right?
Yeah, it's interesting to again focus on this is per day, not like it's an average over the week probably is how it was taken, but that's a lot. So basically the amount of time that you are in school for these teenagers is the amount of time that they are on their phone looking at a screen.
Might correlate, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, for sure. But then, Gen Z, all of us, well, not all of us, we're millennials, but even older, they're on their phones just as much.
Sure.
And so what stood out to me was that it's kind of reflective a little bit of the older generation is doing this partly because their kids are on it, but their kids are also probably on their phones just as much because their parents are on their phones. And so I have a 10-year-old, and I was thinking about, how much time do I spend on my phone? My daughter doesn't have a phone, but she has an electronic device, a tablet, so that she watches shows and videos and games and stuff. And, what type of example am I showing her by me sitting on the couch, scrolling through something, and that I can get, she's doing the same thing. So hopefully, we can learn to interact face to face, not only on devices. But
sure.
That's something that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I think this can be alarming when you really sit and start to think about how much time that we spend on our phones and how much time kids are spending on their phones. A lot has changed even in the last 10 years, and I think something that has to be taken into account, like we talked a little bit about before, is that they're not necessarily just on these social media platforms when they're on their phone. The way that they expect to gain information and learn might come from going on YouTube, might come from going to Google to search something. It's like a pocket Encyclopedia Britannica that you would have gone to in your house to look up something. They're just going to pull up their phone and do it. So some of these numbers are inflated just by things that they would be doing otherwise that have just navigated to this platform.
Sure.
But yet and still, I think it's worthy for us to have this conversation and start to think about what the effects of being in a screen this much every day actually has on someone, their ability to connect and be present in moments that they need to connect and be present, and what else it's actually being used for besides just leisure, right? So interesting data here.
And Barna also asked an interesting question to the people taking the survey to have Gen Z reflect on Gen Z. And so these are some of the reflections. And you can see in the orange there, about 60% said that my generation spends too much time on screens, right? And so it'll be interesting to see, where that goes and how our Gen Z friends and students begin to navigate that. You see 25% says, hey, it's about the right amount. The 3% is wanting some more, right? I'm not sure. Maybe they feel limited by parents or other factors from letting them have as much screen time as they would like. And about 13% doesn't think it really matters. And so that's an interesting number as well. So this is a set of data that comes out monthly from the Global Web Index that looks at the favorite platforms from both females and males across certain age ranges. And so this is for April of this year, the data coming into April. And from these, it looks like the platform of choice for our younger students is Instagram. Instagram seems to be used the most by these particular metrics. And so, of course, you can find metrics to represent a variety of things, but from this source, it looks like Instagram is the most popular platform in terms of total usage. And so we want to shift gears in just a second and talk about another trend, and that's the streaming trend, right? So I think we could all count through how many of these different platforms that we may have at our house. I know we have Hulu, Netflix, and Prime, and Disney Plus. Oh, and Hulu. Okay, so I've got a lot of these on here. Any thoughts on maybe the ways that the streaming shift is affecting younger students?
I mean, yeah, I can count. I can probably most of those I have viewed or have subscribed to already at my house. But there was a study done not too long ago on just seeing the most popular search engines that are out there. YouTube is second to actual Google, which Google owns YouTube. So, I mean, kids are wanting to get immediate answers, and they can go anywhere they want to watch anything immediately. It's on demand. It's right there. You want to go watch a movie that was made in the 80s, you can probably go to one of those places and you're going to be able to watch it. So it's definitely customizable. And,
Are 80s movies making a resurgence?
I don't know. Maybe
for you and
could be.
YouTube,
Could be.
All right.
So I mean, there's a couple things that I think about this. Number one, we have almost all of these, and even I think Peacock we have access to, but we never use because it just came like bundled into everything else. I was telling you the other day, I'm pretty sure someone's got to say, hey, why don't we just bundle all these together? And you can get them for one low monthly price. We're going to be right back where we started with like cable packages and direct TV.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. But the point that you bring up, Kyle, is so pertinent because it taps a little bit on what I brought up earlier, that the way that these kids expect to gain information and learn to do things or learn about the world is just different than what their parents is going to be or even what we're going to be. The way that people expect to learn is different now. And so if you wanted to learn something years ago, you found someone with influence who was reputable, and you went and you got in a room and you listened to them teach you. You went to a lecture, you signed up for a conference or something like that. Now, if you want to learn how to build a deck, then go on YouTube and pull it up, and there's a guy who's an expert who's taking them step by step by step by step by step. And it's funny, we even have some kids in the youth group right now who've got some projects that they would like to see us do, and they've gone and they've done DIY videos, and they've come up with entire proposals based on things that they've been able to search out. So I think sometimes this gets interpreted as them being aloof, that they don't ask necessarily someone in their inner circle to learn how to do something. I don't think it's necessarily that. I think that they've learned to learn in a different way. And if that type of connection and those kind of hands-on interactions in those formative moments is something that you desire as a parent, then that's going to have to be you that initiates it. And is that voice that says, hey, let's do this together. Even if you're following a YouTube video to get it done, it's still a meaningful experience.
Yeah, and I think, in our preparation for talking about this, we talked a little bit about, the difference of Googling or YouTubing how to build a shelf or how to answer, a big life question, right? And we know that, both may be, accessible options, but I think we would all, see the difference in the DIY versus the life skill or the major decision that finds its resource in that way. So the kind of technical term that, we're seeing is this embrace of the information functional culture. We seek to possess information, whether in the form of knowledge or in the form of techniques, in order that we might function more effectively to bring about the results we desire in the circumstances of our lives. We seek to be totally and completely in control of that process, right? Which you both talked about that a little bit. It's this idea that we can do everything on our own, and we have the resources to do it right at our fingertips. And that can definitely affect, development. It can affect socialization, and it can affect maturity for sure. And so, that's a real quick dive into some technology things. Like we said, if you want to dive into that further, we would love to talk to you about it. But I want to shift gears basically, and we're not going to go real deep into this topic, but we do want to acknowledge, in the same way that adults are, grappling with some of the polarization and some of the trends in our society, that is trickling down to our teenagers as well. And we follow a lot of our students on some of these social platforms, and we've seen a lot of posts about various political topics, issues, in many in the same way that parents are learning to deal with this. But one thing I wanted to bring out is you see some news organizations listed on the bottom. Do teens get their news from these places?
No.
No, right?
No.
Teens aren't sitting down and watching the news, no matter where you get your news. This is not how teens are getting their news. Now, a lot of times it filters down from some of these sources, but, if we're having arguments about whether these sources are reputable, those arguments are even more so sometimes for the types of sources that our teens get their information from as well. Any thoughts on, kind of some things you've seen this year with our teens navigating this kind of difficult part of our society that we're in at the moment?
It's super sad to me, the fact that we had to go through this pandemic and have an election, presidential election. And I say sad just because, it was already tough to have to deal with the pandemic, but then throwing all the election stuff on top of that, it was just even more overwhelming than it was before. But wherever they get their news from, whether it's a reputable source or if it's social media or if it's their parents, they may not necessarily be talking about it with their parents or with adults, but they're talking about it amongst themselves, and they're listening to the things that are going on around. I have a 4-year-old, and she doesn't always, I don't think, listen to what I'm saying, but then later on during the day, she'll say something that, I said a joke or something, or I did something that she thought was funny, didn't think that she was paying attention, but then she just repeats what I just did, and I thought, oh, she was paying attention. Mm-hmm. And so, our kids are listening, and so, we as parents need to make sure that we are aware of that. And so, if they start repeating or regurgitating the things that we are saying, just know that they're listening. And we might think that they're listening. They may even say, "I'm not going to listen to you about that," but they're soaking it in. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways that we wanted to bring out is this just idea of some of the maybe bigger effects that this has, and this is from a study that's happening at Bowling Green University. They're looking at the connection between some of this partisan divide and just societal and institutional trust. And a lot of their findings, this is kind of a summary statement. There's a close relationship between partisan divergence and trust, in particular trust at the societal and institutional level. And so when we start to see, this idea of eroding trust of major institutions, a lot of times that leads to eroding trust of leaders in general, of authority figures in general, of anything that, is considered to be, a large group that is putting out information to others. There just becomes a a level of distrust. And the reason this is relevant is, that can easily integrate itself into a family environment. It could be a distrust of parents, or it could be a distrust of church leaders, or it could be a distrust of, school leaders or anywhere else that, once the major institutions in our world, lose their, widespread credibility to some, that can affect other areas of life as well. And so that's something that is relevant to a lot that's going on with our students.
I would just want to echo your sentiment that I don't have kids myself. I'm around kids a lot though, and they do pick this stuff up, and you're going to see it shared in stories, and you're going to see them share articles from where they draw their news from, whether it's something that happened on Reddit or something they saw on Twitter or something that one of their friends posted or a meme that is going around, and they can be pretty adversarial. And so the tone with which these things are being discussed is definitely filtering down. The polarization is alarming in some ways because, I grew up in a house where one parent was for a long time a Democrat and the other one was a Republican, and they had their disagreements, but they didn't villainize each other. I don't know how many houses could exist like that today in this environment. And so you do have this extreme polarization happening. When that seeps into just our worldview and how we view the world, right? I have seen it do exactly what you're talking about, Matt, where it gets applied across the board. Think about the way we talk about sometimes those generational groups that we laid out in the very beginning. Boomers are mad at millennials, and millennials are mad at boomers, and Gen Z is looking at both of them like, y'all are crazy, and you gave us this world that we're living in. You hear a lot of this weird sentiment where nobody's really in this together. We're our own, insular group of the way we see the world, and everyone else is at odds. That can create an ugly situation. We're responsible for presenting a voice in these kids' lives that is different from what they're hearing everywhere else. Something that can counteract and balance against some of that ugliness, I think.
Absolutely. And so, like technology, we could spend a whole lot more time talking about that. But that's just another factor that, in the next couple of roadmap sessions and just as we're having these conversations, it's out there and we need to acknowledge it for sure.
That was a loaded slide, by the way.
Which one?
Yeah,
loaded slide.
Loaded
right?
slide.
Loaded slide, okay. Now here's an even more loaded slide. So, one thing that, is important to acknowledge, and this is another one that, you could spend a whole lot more time talking about, is just that our students are living in a little bit different world, at least in terms of its public acknowledgement of some of the different things that are dealing with in this, ever-changing kind of sexual landscape. An acronym that all parents should know, and this is an acronym that continues to expand and change from time to time, but we see it everywhere, and sometimes we don't take the time to necessarily, make sure we know exactly what it's talking about, but it's this LGBTQIA, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, ally. And so this is something that, as those who work with students, I can tell you that over the course of the years, we've dealt with students that, fall into each one of these categories, and or at least see themselves as falling into each one of these categories, or struggling with different temptations that might make them think that they, belong in one of these categories. And so, basically all we're trying to get at with this slide is the idea of these conversations are happening, and so parents need to get involved in them, right, if they want to have a voice. Kyle, you had some good things to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to be intentional about having these conversations with students, with middle school and high school students, and honestly a little bit younger than that too, because like you said, this is something that is seen and broadcast everywhere we go. Every TV show, it seems like there's some sort of reference to this, or in the news, or wherever we are. My oldest daughter, she has friends who has parents who are, she's got two moms, is how she says it. So it's not uncommon to interact with these conversations, but as parents, we need to make sure that we are initiating these conversations about this, so that when our students are having questions, they at least are aware, hey, my parents know what this is. Because if we don't initiate the conversations, then our kids are going to go to other resources that may be true, but as parents, we're in charge of our kids, and we want to protect them and make sure that we are giving them true information. And so we need to be first informed about what these things are. And so again, having knowledge of what that acronym is, and maybe even some just basic definitions of what those words mean, but then also not only be informed, but informing our kids about what these things are. Obviously, as you get into high school, kids may know more than the parents do, but just acknowledging, hey, I know what these things are, so that you can come talk to me about them, or if you have a question about something, so that they're not going to sources that may not be true, or they're not going to places about or having questions about these things that they can get information that can be really scary. And again, if they're not informed about what things that are true, they're going to think and change their worldview on, well, this is what I heard, so therefore that's how I'm going to view this specific person or this specific topic, even though it's not true. They may think it's true. So we just, as parents, need to be aware and just have those conversations, because then our kids know that we can have those conversations with them. We've got to get over the embarrassment or the stigma or whatever it is that's kind of hush-hush topics. It's not anymore. We may not want to talk about it, but that doesn't mean that other people aren't. So we need to take the initiative on that for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so, this is obviously a topic that we will devote more time to in the future, and we will have an entire parenting roadmap series about talking to students about sexual topics, both these topics related to this acronym and topics like pornography. And I went ahead and put the Covenant Eyes logo on this slide, not necessarily endorsing the product. I don't know a lot about the product, but it is an example of a product that's out there to help students have better internet filtering, so that they may avoid different types of sites. We all know it's not very hard to end up somewhere on the internet that you didn't want to end up, and sometimes having some tools are helpful, or they can be a deterrent for even students that are looking to find certain things. It can be an asset to parents in that way. But we just want to acknowledge that this is a big conversation, and many of our high schoolers are making college decisions, and that they are wanting to go off away from home, and these are conversations that definitely need to be had at home, right? And so I just wanted to show this slide. This is from a college admissions page at one of our state universities, and it speaks to the diversity platform of one of our state schools here in Texas. So our kids are being exposed to this, right? I found this in about 3 clicks by going on a college page, and I'm going to read the descriptor of this chart on that page. It says, the gender unicorn is a simple visual representation of the differences between gender identity, gender expression, sex assigned at birth, and physical and emotional attraction. And to me, there's nothing simple about that at all, right?
Looks pretty.
So it is a big conversation that we're entering into, and one that we need to continue to talk about here at church.
If you go back a slide real quick, I think one thing that we need to make aware of our parents, that we'll definitely engage more in when that class is brought up, but is that last one, ally. I feel like a lot of our students that may not necessarily are students of this church, but students in general really want to be someone who cares about all people, which is a very biblical concept, and so therefore they feel like they need to be an ally. And that is someone who wants to show support, wants to show some compassion to people who are dealing with these other issues, or are feeling that they identify in these different ways. And so, that compassion is great, but we've got to funnel it in a biblical way. And so again, having those conversations, yes, we need to support our friends, but we don't necessarily need to support the things that they do, or how. I mean, that's a hard conversation to have. So
Sure.
That may be something that your student has already asked questions about. So
I think you bring up a really good point. Having the conversation is so important because the worldview or computer programming, the software that we were talking about at the beginning, it's going to get defined somewhere. And you've got a chance to be one of the voices that is prominent and prevalent and trusted in that conversation, instead of waiting until something goes awry and trying to course correct and not having that influence and trust already built. The ally thing is a great point to be brought up. One of the things that I would hope that we can do a better job at is engaging in these conversations ahead of time, because the culture right now is going to tell you, and it's going to tell our kids, that a Christian worldview is not an ally of these people, is not supportive of these people, and as a matter of fact, is hateful towards these people, right? So how we position ourselves as staff and teachers, and then parents as well, will go a long way to demonstrate ahead of time that this is not a hateful worldview, that we are true allies, but many times not in the way that the culture is demanding, and understanding what that looks like and how to distinguish that, which, like you said, is really, really difficult. But it's territory we have to go into. We get a couple church services a week. As good as Kyle is, don't hope that he can handle this slide with your kid in 3 weeks of lessons about it. I mean, they're getting peppered and sprayed down with the culture every single day on every single social media platform. They need you too.
Yeah, and to Marcus's point, there never becomes a time in which, we would say we're fully comfortable talking about these topics, right? And you as parents, it could be difficult, and that's okay, but it doesn't mean that it is something that we need to shy away from. It means something we need to engage. I want to share a quick thought from Jeremy Treat that I think, really hits on what Kyle and Marcus were saying. It says, compassion does not compromise theology, it enriches it. Although people might come across like they're looking for an argument, what most people need is a safe space to express the tension they feel between their faith in God and what they are experiencing in their lives. While we need sound doctrine, we also need communities of compassion, right? And so we're looking for, the way to be people of grace and truth, right, as modeled by Jesus. And so, again, another big conversation that we need to continue to dive into. But our last topic is around anxiety and stress. And this is a really big one, really amplified this last year during this COVID-19 world for a variety of factors that will be processed and discussed, probably for a long time to come about some of the lessons that we've learned throughout this year. But some quick research here from Barna. This title for this slide is Gen Z Under Pressure, Anxiety, and Empowerment. These questions were phrased around this idea of always or usually feel. And so we see that 31% of Gen Z feels that internal pressure, right? Pressure they're putting on themselves to be successful or a need to be perfect. In addition to that, there's 25% that say they feel externally pressured, judged by older generations and pressured by my parents due to expectations. 26% say they feel anxious or afraid to fail, anxious about important decisions and uncertain about the future. And the last one is they feel empowered, ability to accomplish my goals, satisfied with my life choices. There's someone that believes in me. They feel prepared for everyday life, optimistic about the future, and deeply cared for by those around me. And so again, these stats are from middle to summer 2020. It'd be interesting to see them now, right, after this last year. I don't really know what to make of these numbers, right? I would have assumed, I don't know what your thoughts are, I would have actually assumed that the first three, internally pressured, externally pressured, and anxious, might have been higher. But nevertheless, that's a large cross segment of students feeling that way, right? Mm-hmm. 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4, feeling that level of anxiety or pressure, and only 1 out of 4 potentially feeling empowered, which is another thing to look at. Any thoughts from this data jump out to you?
Yeah, it is a little bit alarming. I think something that you just said is a good jumping off point, that 1 in every 4 actually feels like things are okay. Only 1 in every 4 is confident and moving forward, feels like they're moving in the right direction. That means 3 out of 4 are dealing with one of these other pressure points, and probably there's a mixture between the two, right? Internal pressure, external pressure, cause anxiety, those sort of things. The thing that sticks out to me specifically from this slide and this research, the empowered group, someone believes in me. We've been talking about the story of Jacob in our high school class over the last few weeks. Jacob is a guy that is this graph to a T. His whole life was about obtaining the blessing. He needed someone to tell him, you're good, I care about you, you're special, you have a bright future in front of you. And he messed up a lot of his life trying to get that blessing until he ran into God and realized this is the only one that I actually need the blessing from. So these are, to me, identity-based issues, identity-based manifestations. We need to be able to speak in love and encouragement and empowerment to these kids and help them ground their identity in the place that is not sand that's going to slip out from beneath them at every moment, like being successful or being perfect, right? Or being sure in every decision that they make. If we can help move their center of identity away from those things that are not certain, maybe we can help a little bit. But
yeah, I think what I take away from this, and the excellent points, is that we can't encourage our students enough. Like, it needs to be a constant reminder. We all need to be constantly reminded of things, and reminding them and encouraging them, empowering them, as the graph says. I mean, you need to say that to your kids every day. Like, I believe in you. I love you. You are important to me. You have value. You have worth, and that needs to be the louder voice. Then you need to do better in your grades. You need to do better on your team. You need to be a better sibling, whatever. Those things need to be said as well, but I think the louder voice, the loudest voice, needs to be that they're loved and they're cared for, and like it says on there, prepared for everyday life, optimistic about the future. Like, it's always about saying things are good, you are good, we're doing this together, not you're alone. I feel like those internal, external, and anxious thoughts are a lot of maybe those kids feel like they're by themselves, even though they have all these voices around them telling them what to do. No one is helping them with whatever they're trying to accomplish. So that empowerment of I'm with you, it's just that needs to be the loudest voice. So that it's not 1 in 4, it's 3 and 4, or 4 and 4, even better.
yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like to end with this slide about anxiety. We just thought this was kind of interesting. This was a question posed to Gen Z. If you're feeling anxious, what makes you feel better? And you see the number one thing there, 26% said music, right? It's kind of interesting. So, I mean, we all, like music and different things, but, when your students listening to their headphones or different things, and, maybe, they're off by themselves doing that or something, it might cause you to ask the question, it might just be doing it because they like a particular song or band or something, but it might also be a response to something. And, it might just be a cue to look for as your kids are dealing with everything going on. And then as you go through there, a lot of things that adults choose to do to deal with anxiety as well. I'd like to close by reading Jesus' statement again to the woman who is healed there in Luke 8, in the midst of her anxiety, in the midst of her social pressure that she felt about her condition, in the midst of kind of becoming the center of attention when she wanted to be unnoticed. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." And peace is the disposition of those who have experienced healing through faith, right? And so as those who are being witnesses to a watching world, the way that we deal with anxiety, the way that our students deal with anxiety, and the way that we help each other through that is very important. So thank you to Marcus and Kyle for joining us tonight. Thank you for each of you for tuning in. And next week we'll continue with our parent panels. So we hope that you have a great rest of the week.